Hi, it's Phil here from Revive My Ride, and today I'm going to show you how to paint your own alloy wheels at home and get great professional quality results using no specialist equipment. This video is part 2 and it's all about the painting process. If you haven't watched my preparation video, then I suggest you watch it now because preparation is key. You'll find the link to it in the description below. And at the end of the video I'll share a tip for a product I found that'll keep your alloy wheels looking nicer for longer. Okay, let's get to it. Okay, here's the painting process that we're going to follow, just in brief. We're going to apply 3 coats of high build primer. And once it's dried fully, we're going to smooth it back with a Scotch-Brite pad and water. And then once that's all dry, we're going to apply the base coat, which is the colour. And again, we're going to do 3 coats. And it'll be a very similar application to when we did the primer. Finally, once that's dried fully, we're going to apply 3 coats of lacquer in exactly the same way, and that's what's going to protect the paint. Before we start painting, just a quick word about protective equipment. Even if you're painting in a well-ventilated area, you should consider wearing a half mask that will protect you against organic vapours and high-level fine dust. Also, it's a good idea to wear some gloves to protect your hands too. Time to start painting, and we're going to make a start with the primer. As you can see, I'm using a high build primer, and that will help cover up any scratches or scuffs. Even though we've done a good job on our prep, this will help us get the best possible results. I'm going to start by painting the back first and then the front, and ultimately when I do the base coat, which is the colour, the final surface I'll paint will be the front, and that's so that any overspray is going through to the back rather than the other way, and that will give you the best possible finish on the front, which is the most visible surface. I'm going to start by painting the rim first, and I'm trying to get under the edge where the wheel meets the tyre as best as I can. I'll then move on to the hub, and then I'll finish off with the bigger areas, which are the inside of the wheel. This first coat is just a light one, just a dusting really, so you don't have to get it on thick at all, so just go over and give it a little dusting, and this will give a good foundation for the following primer coats. Sometimes a droplet can form on the nozzle, and if this happens it can drip down onto your workpiece and cause a run. So make sure you check it regularly, and if necessary dab it away with some lint-free cloth. Another tip, and you'll see this better on the base coat later when we're painting the front, is make sure the can's moving when you activate the nozzle. Otherwise you can get a build-up of spray in one position before you start moving the can, and then that can lead to runs or a build-up of paint. Leave the paint to dry for 10 to 15 minutes and then you can apply the second coat, and this time you can apply it a little bit thicker. And after another break, then the final and third coat. After about 30 minutes of drying, you can flip the wheel over and start painting the front of the wheel. But what you can't see in the video is that I've used a couple of blocks underneath to support the tyre, and this keeps the painted surfaces of the back side of the alloy wheel from touching the bench. Similar to what we did before, you'll want to apply 3 coats of primer and leave 10 to 15 minutes for drying in between each one. The painting process is really similar to what we just did on the back, but just a point that I'll make is make sure that you get paint down into the bolt holes, otherwise you'll be able to see that it's not painted in there. But also the edges of those holes are really bad for building up paint and causing a run, so you'll need to be careful and spray quite lightly in those areas, or even allow it to dry slightly before giving it another little spray. Once you have all the primer coats done, then ideally you would leave the paint to harden for 24 hours, and in fact that's what it says on the back of the can. But I find that it's fine just to leave it overnight, especially if it's not very damp or cold out. You can speed up this process using heaters such as an infrared heating element. While you're waiting for that to dry, you can go make a start on the other wheels. Once the paint is hardened off fully, we're now going to use a Scotch-Brite pad to smooth the surface. This will give us the best possible result when we apply the base colour coat. This step is optional really, but I found that this step is really important in giving me the best possible finish. So all we're going to do is wet the surface just using a hose or a watering can, and then give it a once over with the Scotch-Brite pad. You can really feel the difference. It'll be really powdery to the touch before you start, and it should feel smooth afterwards. This surface will still be primed, ready for the next coat of paint, because it's like doing very fine sanding. Even though it's a less important area, I did the back of the wheel too, because it only takes about 5 minutes. It's really important that the wheel is really dry before you move to the next paint stage, So I'm using a vacuum set in reverse to blow away the excess water, and then it's a case of just leaving it in the sun for a while. Do a bit of work on the other wheels while you're waiting. The moment has arrived and we're finally ready to paint the silver. Here you can see I'm using a Worth silver alloy wheel paint. This is a really high quality paint that's given me good results in the past. The painting process here is exactly the same as what we did with the primer. So we're going to start off with quite a light first coat, and we're going to paint the rim, getting around the edge of the rim to the tyre as much as possible. And then we'll paint the fiddly bits like the back of the hub and the back of the spokes, etc. So here you can see me just working my way around the hub and spraying the back of the spokes. And then the big parts of the wheel we'll do last, because with all the fiddly bits done, we'll know we'll be able to get really good even sprays here and get really great coverage. This is a really fast drying paint, so as long as it's 15 degrees Celsius or 60 Fahrenheit out, then it should dry in about 10 minutes and be ready for another coat. Obviously if it's colder, then leave it a little bit longer or be prepared to use a heater. So now we just have the second and third coats to do, and this time we can afford to put it on a little bit thicker. But remember, it's better to do more coats than to try to put it on too heavy and risk getting runs, which will just look a mess. So take your time and get your second and third coats done and make sure that you get really good even coverage and you'll be fine. After about 30 minutes of drying, then we can flip the wheel over ready to do the front. But remember that silver paint on the back won't be hard for quite some time. In fact, you should leave it overnight ideally. Again, I'm using wooden blocks underneath to support the tyre to make sure that the alloy wheel doesn't touch the bench and damage the paint. Since the front of the wheel is the most important surface because that's the one everybody's going to see and we want it to look as great as possible, I'm using some panel wipe here just to wipe over all the surfaces. So panel wipe will remove any residues of oil or grease or wax or anything like that. But also if you use it with a lint-free cloth, then you can remove any dust that might be on those front surfaces too. Don't be tempted to use something like thinners or white spirit or something like that. Some of those products will leave a residue on the surface, or they'll actually take some of the primer off that we painstakingly applied earlier. We're ready to apply the first of the 3 base coats. And remember, this first coat is just going to be a light one. And as you can see, I'm spraying around the edges of the wheel. Similar to before, I'm trying to make sure I get under the edge of the wheel where it meets the tyre. After that, I'll move on to spraying the bolt holes where the wheel bolts go through into the wheel. You have to spray from a couple of different angles to get the coverage down into the hole properly. Finally, with all of the tricky bits done, there's the inside of the spokes and then the bigger areas of the outside of the wheels that can be done. After about 10 minutes of drying, we can apply the second and then the third coats. We can apply it a little bit thicker this time, but I can't stress this enough. Don't put it on too thick, otherwise you'll get runs and it can be really difficult to correct it. After the third coat, it should be looking really good and you should have nice even coverage everywhere. If this isn't the case, then go ahead and do another coat. Ideally, let the base coat silver dry overnight, or at the very minimum for several hours if it's a warm day. This is really important before applying the clear coat lacquer to ensure it adheres properly. The temptation is to skimp on time here, but you've been warned. It can ruin the whole job if you're not careful. So here I'm spraying the lacquer in the same methodology that I've used before. So I'm going to start with the rim, making sure I get under the edge towards the tyre, and then move to the hub and the back of the spokes, and then finally painting the larger areas of the inside of the wheel. Again, we're going to be using 3 coats, and this will really protect the paint and make your paint job last. There's just a couple of important things to note when spraying clear coat. So the first is it's thinner and much easier to get runs in the lacquer through overspraying. And the second is that the first coat is much more visible because you can see where it's going on, but this becomes more difficult with the second and third coats. So the best advice is to use multiple light coats to avoid overspraying. We're on the home straight now, so after about 30 minutes of drying, flip the wheel over. Again, I'm using blocks of wood to support the tyre and prevent the back of the wheel from touching the bench. The painting process is exactly as we've done a few times now, so I'm not going to go over it again, but just be aware this is the most important surface. By now you'll have had lots of experience painting the other coats, so take your time, get this right, and it should look great. We're finally finished painting, so leave the lacquer to harden overnight and you should be ready to fit the wheel. Now for my top tip for keeping your nice shiny wheels looking nicer for longer. The biggest enemy is road dirt and brake dust, so what we need is a product that will help keep this off the surface of your wheel. And here it is, Meguiar's ceramic wax. This product's been around a while and has a proven track record for protecting paint, and I've found that it works great on wheels. Here's how to apply it. Your wheels should be really clean because you've just put them back on the car, but if you've been running around for a few days then you'll need to make sure they're clean before you apply the ceramic wax. So make sure you clean the front faces, behind the wheel as best you can, and in other areas like the bolt holes with soapy water. Now give the wheel a really good spray down with a water hose. Once most of the water's run away but while the wheel's still wet, start spraying the Meguiar's ceramic wax. You only have to do 5 or 6 sprays. Now using a microfiber cloth, give the wheel a really good wipe down, doing all the spokes and the outer rim areas, behind the spokes as well as you can reach, and not forgetting the wheel nut recesses as well. Keep wringing out the cloth and re-wiping the wheel until it's almost completely dry. Now all you need to do is grab a nice clean cloth and give it a good buff down on all surfaces. Just look at the amazing protection that it gives. The water just runs away. And when you come to clean the wheel, the brake dust doesn't sit on the surface as bad either, so you'll be able to just use soapy water to sponge it away and blast it clean. This protection will stay like this for at least 6 months. It's just an amazing product. Thanks for watching and I hope you liked the video. If you did, please remember to subscribe and hopefully I'll catch you next time. You'll find links to all the parts and materials that I used in the description below, and if you have any questions at all, please post them in the comments section and I'll answer if I can. Okay, bye for now.